Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today. And yesterday, the New Orleans Saints beat the Dallas Cowboys 44-19. Not just beat, crushed them. And so, yeah, it was a great performance. The Saints, they improved to 2-0. The Cowboys go to 1-1. And I'm going to tell everybody the big reason why the Saints won this game and how big and why they won this game so big. And I honestly think the big reason is the media and everyone downplaying the Saints after their win last week. I really hated the way how the Saints went out there and, well, I don't hate the way they went out there and played, but I hate that they went out there and played that good last week against the Panthers, and it's not being talked about. But here's another thing. I know Washington's nowhere close to, the Panthers level, but everybody's talking so big about Baker Mayfield and the Bucs when they have their performance in Week 1 against the Washington Commanders. And I know the Commanders are a lot better team than the Carolina Panthers are, but the Commanders were just as bad as the Panthers were last year. But that didn't stop everybody after Week 1 hyping up Baker Mayfield. And I'm not coming at Baker Mayfield or the Bucs at all, because Baker Mayfield just had a great performance against the Lions. They had a great road win. I'm really impressed with the Bucs, just as impressed I am with the Saints. But what I am saying is that Baker got all this hype after Week 1, beating a bad team, beating a bad defense. People were talking about Baker this, Baker that. No one was talking about Derek Carr and the Saints after their Week 1 performance like they were Baker Mayfield. It just, they got downplayed. They were not recognized enough after Week 1, and that made them want to go into Dallas and win this ball game. Me personally, did I see the Cowboys losing this game? No. Just because of how good the Dallas Cowboys have been at home in the regular season. That's the only reason I thought the Cowboys were going to win this game. If this game would have been in New Orleans, I would have picked the Saints to win this game. But just because of the fact that this game was in Dallas, I fully intended I did pick the Dallas Cowboys to win this game. So I was wrong, but I thought this was going to be a close game. I thought the Saints were going to fight like hell to win this game. But I thought it was going to come down to the end and the Cowboys were going to win. There were some people saying that Cowboys were going to kick the Saints' butts and, this was going to be a blowout. I didn't expect that at all. But the Saints are going to be a good team this year. Does Dallas hit the panic mode? The big question is, does Dallas hit the panic button? I was concerned with the way that Dak Prescott played in this game. I thought the defense was ass in this game, but I don't know if you pushed the panic button. This is a really good Saints team with a really, really good offensive coordinator who they've added in Kubiak, and he's doing some really good things with them. Carr looks good. Rashid Shaheed is just a monster for this Saints team. He had another great game. Kamara's been outstanding. We know what he can do. They also have Chris Olave. This is a hard matchup for the Dallas Cowboys. And this was also a fired-up Saints team who was looking to do something in this game after not getting enough credit last week. So I would say if something goes wrong in next week's game, even though they're playing another good team in the Baltimore Ravens, if the defense looks as bad as it looked this week and Dak plays as bad as he did in yesterday's game, even though he wasn't he did have a couple picks thrown. I will say Dak's first interception was not his fault. The wide receiver completely slipped. I can't remember I know it was number 83. I don't know who number 83 was. I think his first name's Jalen. I'm not too sure. I think his last name. I know his last name's Brooks or something. But 83 slipped. Dak threw the interception. His first interception wasn't his fault. Second one was. It wasn't a completely terrible game, but it wasn't a great game. But at the same time, it was going up against a good defense. But both Dak and the defense have to be better in order to win next week against the Ravens. Good thing the Cowboys are playing at home, I guess. But, it will be an interesting game next week against the Ravens. And if the Cowboys play the same way, they will lose. So they have to play better. The defense has to be better. Dak has to be better. I think the Cowboys ultimately win. I don't see the Cowboys losing 2 home games in a row. But the other thing I look at is if the Cowboys beat the Ravens next week, I think if we see the Cowboys beat the Ravens next week and the Ravens go to 0-3, you have to start to get really concerned about the Ravens, because if the Ravens lose to the Cowboys next week, they're 0-3, and then their next two games are against the Bills and the Bengals. So I don't see them winning both games after that. So we could be talking about, if Dallas gets a win and gets back on track next week, we could be talking about the Ravens maybe being 1-4 or 0-5. So the Ravens, that's a must-win game for them next week against Dallas, having Cincinnati and Buffalo after. So Baltimore will be coming into Dallas ready to win, and they had a tough loss last week. So this is another team that's going to be coming into Dallas fired up and ready to win. So Dallas has to be ready for Baltimore next week. But that will be an intriguing matchup. Probably my favorite game that is scheduled for week 3. All right, let's go over this game. The scoring summary: there was 3 scores in the first quarter. Alvin Kamara had a 5-yard touchdown run. I completely forgot to mention that I have Alvin Kamara in fantasy. He really saved me this week. But yeah, so Alvin Kamara had a 5-yard touchdown run, 7-0. Brandon Aubrey had a 52-yard field goal at 7-3. Then Derek Carr, on the first play of the drive, throws a 70-yard touchdown pass to Rashid Shaheed. We saw something very similar last week against Carolina, throwing a touchdown bomb to Rashid Shaheed. I think this was a little bit later in the drive. I think this was like 3 or 4 plays in to the drive last week, and it was like a 50-yard or 55-yard throw last week against the Panthers. But it was a great throw by Derek Carr, and that's when I think it really kind of, or at least synced in for me, like, ooh, the Saints are a threat to win this game, and they look good. Because Derek Carr was making great throws. He made great throws on the first drive to get them the touchdown, and then he does that on the first play. That's when it really synced in for me that the Saints were a serious threat to win this ball game. And so then going into the second quarter, Aubrey makes another field goal. I want to talk about Aubrey for a minute. For me, in these first couple of games, Brandon Aubrey's been absolutely fantastic, by the way. He was 4 for 4 in this game. All of his kicks were from 40 or more, 40 yards, 48 yards, 52. Or sorry, one of them was from 38. In the second quarter, but had a 38-yarder, and then all of the rest of his kicks were from 40 plus. I don't know how people will think about this. I think Cowboys fans will love this, and I think other NFL fans might hate this. But I'm starting to think Brandon Aubrey might be the best kicker in the NFL. Justin Tucker is amazing. I love Justin Tucker. I am also saying this as a Texas Longhorns fan. Justin Tucker, a former Texas Longhorn. I love Justin Tucker. I think if you look at all of the 30 NFL kickers right now, who are starting kickers, and you look at all of them and who's the most accomplished in their career, who's the best kicker of all, out of all-time stats. Justin Tucker, of course, is number 1. But if we're talking about right now, I think Brandon Aubrey is the best kicker in the NFL. I think there are other names you can put up there with him. Harrison Butker is amazing. Kaimi Fairbairn, a guy in Houston, who I'm a Texans fan, he's been outstanding. He's kicked, I think, 5 or 6 50-yarders this year, including a 59-yarder for the Texans. Has been outstanding. Also perfect, like 6 for 7 or 7 for 7 on the year. Absolutely outstanding for the Texans. He showcased that last night. So I look at guys mainly like Butker and Fairbairn and, number 1, Brandon Aubrey. Mainly Aubrey and Fairbairn. I mean, right now, are they better kickers than Justin Tucker? Because I remember watching the Ravens game yesterday against the Raiders, and I heard a stat. Justin Tucker, 1 for 7 in the last couple years from 50 plus. Justin Tucker is automatic elsewhere, but we've seen a couple misses. He's had 2 misses already this year. So I just don't know if right now he's the best kicker in the NFL anymore. He's still a great kicker to have, but I look at guys like Aubrey, and I look at guys like Fairbairn and Butker, and maybe you can name a couple other kickers in this league, and I think they're better kickers than Tucker are right now. Maybe Tucker, maybe we start to see flashes of the old Justin Tucker, but in these last couple of years, he's had some moments where, he doesn't look as good as he used to. And I did hear the stat yesterday, 1 for 7 in the last couple years from 50 plus, which definitely doesn't sound good. So, yeah. All right. Aubrey made the 38-yarder, 14-6. Then Kamara has a 57-yard touchdown pass or 57-yard touchdown reception from a pass from Derek Carr. It was a screen pass, 21-6. Then Dak Prescott has a 67-yard touchdown pass to CeeDee Lamb to make it 21-13. Excellent run by CeeDee Lamb after the catch, 21-13. Alvin Kamara, another touchdown, 12-yard touchdown run, 28-13. Derek Carr with a 1-yard touchdown run, 35-13. Brandon Aubrey going into halftime, 40-yard field goal, 35-16. And then Brandon Aubrey with a 4-yard field goal, 40-yard field goal, it's 35-19. That drive was very disappointing for Dallas because they could have got a touchdown to start off that half. And I think that's a different momentum for Dallas. I think, if Dallas ends up, getting a touchdown on that drive, it's 35-23 instead of 35-19. Maybe their defense is more motivated on the next drive to, go out there and get a stop. Instead, the defense is out there for 7 minutes and 56 seconds. Alvin Kamara has a 7-yard touchdown run, and Dallas doesn't get the ball until 1 minute left in the third quarter. I think this game could end up differently if Dallas scores a touchdown to start off the half, but instead, their defense goes on an 8-minute drive. And the PAT was actually blocked. It made it 41-19, though, when Alvin Kamara had the 7-yard touchdown run. Then Blake Grupe with a 26-yard field goal for the Saints, the only field goal on the day for the New Orleans Saints. He's another guy who's had a great start of the year. He had a great day last week in Carolina. I know it's a 26-yarder against Dallas, but, I mean, he had a 57-yarder last week against Carolina. So he's another young kicker who has looked really good so far this season. I'm not saying he's better than Justin Tucker, but I'm saying that's another kicker to watch out for. All right, game leaders, Derek Carr, 11 for 16, 243 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Both were huge touchdown passes, 57 yards to Kamara, 70 to Shaheed. 1 interception was thrown, though, for Carr. But he had a rushing touchdown as well. Dak Prescott, 27 for 39, 293 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Rushing yards, Kamara had 20 carries for 115 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Rico Dowdle had 7 carries for 30 rushing yards. Receiving yards, Rashid Shaheed had 4 receptions for 96 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. CeeDee Lamb had 4 receptions for 90 receiving yards with 1 touchdown. This was a very hard matchup for CeeDee Lamb to go up against these Ravens. I mean, CeeDee Lamb did have a tough time in this game. He had a great touchdown reception. Outside of that touchdown reception, 65-yard touchdown reception for CeeDee Lamb, this defense gave him a lot of trouble in this football game. All right, let's go over some other stats. Outside of Kamara, Jamal Williams looked really good for the Saints, the backup. 8 carries, 39 rushing yards just a couple years ago. Yeah, he was the touchdown machine for the Lions. Taysom Hill had 3 carries for 18 rushing yards. Shaheed had 3 carries for 13 rushing yards. Ezekiel Elliott had 6 carries for 16 rushing yards. He had a very nice reception that I really loved. It was a great play by Dak Prescott mainly. He had 2 receptions and 16 receiving yards on the day, but it was a 15-yard reception where Dak was in trouble and was about to get sacked, and we saw him flip it to Ezekiel, and he had a very nice run. That was on the first drive of the second half. That was a great reception by him. Jalen Tolbert had 6 receptions for 82 receiving yards. He looked really good for Dallas. Luke Schoonmaker, with Jake Ferguson out, had 6 receptions for 43 receiving yards. Rico Dowdle had 4 receptions for 29 receiving yards. Cooks, after a really good week 1, only had 2 receptions for 19 receiving yards. Already went over Ezekiel Elliott, and I was right. It was Jalen Brooks that had 1 reception for 10 receiving yards, and he slipped on the interception. So I did get that name right. And so, yeah. It was some guys had a good day in the receiving room for Dallas. CD was great. And I do think CD was great because of how good New Orleans defense was going up against him in this game. Tolbert looked really good. Schoonmaker, the 2 young guys looked really good with Tolbert and Schoonmaker. But I think, unfortunately, I think you're going to need more from CeeDee Lamb, even though he had such a good day going up against a good defense. And you're going to need more from Brandon Cooks. And unfortunately, you're going to need Jake Ferguson healthy for this Dallas offense to be better. All right, let's go to New Orleans side with the receiving end. Outside of Shaheed, Chris Olave had 4 receptions for 81 receiving yards, much better than his week 1, 2 receptions for 11 receiving yards. That's another thing I think is really impressive about the Saints week 1 win against the Panthers. The fact that they beat the Panthers 47-10 with one of their most talented wide receivers, Chris Olave, only having 2 receptions for 11 receiving yards. Kamara had 2 receptions for 65 receiving yards and 1 reception for Taysom Hill. I feel like it's so impressive that Derek Carr had 243 passing yards and only completed 11 passes. The main fact of why that happened was because of the big touchdowns for Shaheed and Kamara. All right, let's go to some defensive stats. Dak Prescott did fumble in this game, but it was recovered by Jalen Tolbert, so it is not a lost fumble. That was the only fumble in this ballgame. Eric Kendricks looks pretty good again. 8 tackles, led the Cowboys in tackles. They only had 1 sack. Great job by this Saints offensive line. 1 sack, it was Chauncey Golston. Only 2 tackles for loss as well for this Dallas defense, who absolutely killed Deshaun Watson in week 1. I mean, they were hunting him down. The Saints defense had 3 sacks in this game, a half a sack for Chase Young, 1.5 sacks for Carl Granderson, and the other sack went to Brian Brees, 4 tackles for loss. So, the Cowboys' offensive line wasn't terrible in this game either. But, Saints' offensive line did a really good job of protecting Derek Carr in this one. Although I will say that the Saints only passed the ball 16 times. So, it's not like they were, so there weren't a lot of opportunities to sack him. They sacked him 1 in 16 opportunities, or 1 in 17 opportunities. So, meanwhile, Dak Prescott threw the ball, 37 times, and the Saints had 3 sacks. So, I feel like the Cowboys could have had more sacks in this game if the Saints passed more, but since the Saints were up so big, they didn't. All right, interceptions. Donovan Wilson had an interception for the Cowboys, thrown by Derek Carr, and then the interceptions for the Saints. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, with an interception, and then Paulson Adabu had an interception for 47 yards. Returned it for 47 yards. So, yeah, that's it for this game. Let me know your thoughts on the game in the comment section, and peace out.